still remember the smell of the damp Georgia pine needles mixed with the metallic reek of rotting freezer burn when we unzipped that heavy plastic tarp. We were standing in a remote, pitch-black den, our shaky flashlights cutting through the dark to reveal a grotesque, 7'7" carcass frozen solid in a block of ice. We honestly thought we were looking at the discovery of the century, the ultimate proof that the monsters of our nightmares were real.
Before we dive into today's investigation, I want to be clear. The stories and theories shared on this channel are part of an alternative history exploration. We're digging into the unexplained, the unsettling, and the what-ifs of our world. Think of this as a journey into the dark side of history, part research, part legend. Watch with an open mind, but remember, this is for narrative and entertainment purposes only.
But the real horror didn't come from the creature's matted hair or its frozen, empty eyes. The true terror settled in when the morning sun hit the trees and the global media machine caught wind of it. CNN and the New York Times didn't just report the story. They completely swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. It makes your skin crawl to realize how easily the grand institutions we trust to guard the truth were completely weaponized and brought to their knees. The whole thing wasn't an alien invasion or a biological anomaly. It was a deeply cynical, calculated marketing ploy cooked up by an insider who just wanted their 15 minutes of global fame. They didn't care who they destroyed along the way, straight up ruining a local police officer's career just to secure a fleeting moment of internet clout. You have to look past the frozen prop and face the psychological abyss left in its wake. Two regular hobbyists with a rubber suit and some leftover meat managed to manipulate the entire civilized world overnight. If a couple of random guys can hack our collective reality that effortlessly, you have to ask yourself a terrifying question. What else have the gatekeepers validated as absolute truth? And what other massive lies are you blindly accepting right now? The glowing screen was the only thing illuminating my face at 3 in the morning when I clicked the link that completely ruined my life. You were just scrolling through your feed at night, totally relaxed, and then bam! A massive, breaking headline pops up claiming your absolute favorite actor just died in a horrific, tragic accident. Your heart drops instantly, your stomach turns, and your thumb moves on pure, unadulterated instinct to see the proof. That single, desperate urge to witness a tragedy is exactly what they engineered to destroy you. This wasn't just a series of harmless rumors or mean internet gossip. It was a highly sophisticated, weaponized psychological trap designed by predators who understand the darkest corners of human curiosity. The second you clicked that link, you weren't just a passive observer looking at a sad headline. You became an active accomplice in a massive digital plague, unknowingly helping invisible hackers bypass your security and infect your very own personal system. Millions of everyday people willingly traded away their most private personal data, their intimate conversations, and their private bank details just for a fleeting, morbid rush of adrenaline. We handed over the keys to our digital lives because we simply could not look away from the specter of death. Those old early 2010s Facebook scams faded into internet history, but the underlying psychological exploit they exposed remains perfectly intact today. The real virus isn't the corrupt code hiding in the hyperlink. It is our own sick, desperate need to watch the world burn, a flaw in our mental programming that makes us completely defenseless against the next big trap. I spent 3 agonizing months staring at high-resolution scans of a dead man's teeth, trying to prove to myself that the icon singing on the television wasn't the actual person who wrote the songs. The music industry executives always call it a necessary corporate transition behind closed doors. But when you stop listening to the melodies and start dissecting the hidden messages buried deep within the audio tracks, you distinctly hear the terrifying truth. I buried Paul. The psychological dread doesn't actually come from the wild theory that a global superstar was replaced by a secret body double after a fatal crash. The true horror comes from looking at the scrapbooks under a harsh desk lamp, comparing the shifting blemishes, the altering moles, and the subtle, impossible changes in the jawlines. You realize that a massive, multi-billion-dollar global brand possesses the terrifying power to completely swap out a human being while the entire world just sits back and watches. We actively choose to rationalize the chilling anomalies as mere natural aging because the alternative is simply too heavy to bear. We are so incredibly desperate to keep our idols alive that we will gladly accept a living ghost as long as the music keeps playing. The line between the original man and the corporate myth is completely erased until they become the exact same entity in our minds. But you can't help but wonder about the person trapped behind the mask. What happens to the human psyche when you are forced to live another man's life perfectly? And what happens when the double decides they no longer want to play the part? We found the exact coordinates scrawled in the back of his final, frantic journal. A set of numbers pointing directly to a blank spot on the map swallowed by a permanent wall of dense sea fog. The public desperately invents the myth of the secret tropical island where fallen cultural icons sip drinks away from passing ships because the alternative reality is too dark for us to face. The brutal truth we try to hide from is that the intense, crushing pressure of extreme global fame systematically shortens the life expectancy of our idols until there is absolutely nothing left of them. As an audience, we act like absolute monsters, treating the severe mental and physical decline of a living human being as primetime entertainment. We squeeze every single drop of life out of them for our own amusement, and then we act completely shocked when they suddenly snap or vanish. The staged death myth is just a collective psychological coping mechanism we construct to alleviate our own immense guilt. We tell ourselves they are happily hiding out in the shadows of a private paradise just so we don't have to admit that our own insatiable voyeurism effectively put them in the ground. But when you look through a long-range camera lens through the dense coastal fog, the romantic fantasy completely evaporates into pure terror. You have to consider the dark, hidden angle of the found footage mystery. What if one of those legendary stars didn't actually choose to escape the spotlight, but was violently forced into the deep shadows by the people who owned them? The overpowering smell of old lamb bones and rotting cow gizzards inside that hot, unventilated studio room was enough to make the veteran cameraman violently vomit on the floor. I was staring directly at grainy, black and white 16mm film footage leaked from the deepest, most secure vaults of Area 51, watching anomalous alien limbs bend with a sickening heavy realism. The atmosphere in the room turned completely ice-cold as the brutal mechanics of the deception were slowly laid bare right in front of us. The brilliant filmmakers purchased cheap animal organs from a local butcher to construct a grotesque extraterrestrial corpse, successfully fooling over 11 million television viewers worldwide in a single evening. They knew exactly how to trigger our primal fear of the unknown by using the literal flesh and bone of the earth. The creators eventually came clean and fully confessed to the entire hoax. But the most terrifying part of the human story didn't end with their admission. Even today, thousands of deeply paranoid individuals still aggressively insist that the government secretly stepped in and forced a fake confession to hide a real, living anomaly from the public. This is where the myth and our reality completely bridge together into something truly monstrous. We have become so fundamentally broken by decades of institutional lies and hidden agendas that we would rather believe in a manufactured monster than trust our fellow man. The dark truth is that the deception didn't create the paranoia. It just held up a mirror to a society that is completely desperate to believe the lie. The ancient, flickering CRT monitor cast a sick green glow over the empty room as the countdown timer ticked closer to the dead center of midnight. We all took that deep, collective breath when the clock finally struck the hour and the world didn't instantly burst into flames, laughing off the ancient prophecy like it was all a big joke. But you can't ignore the dark, psychological undercurrent of that massive 2012 apocalypse hoax. It revealed a deeply disturbing truth about the modern human mind. There is a collective, subconscious yearning for total societal collapse hiding just beneath our polite surfaces, a weird desire to see everything reset that united the entire globe in a state of suspended panic. We were secretly disappointed that the end never came. The monitor suddenly glitches violently, flashing a rapid sequence of modern disaster footage directly into your retinas. It makes you think about the human story behind the survival. Did the fabric of our world truly survive that midnight transition? Or did our collective perception of reality simply fracture forever that night? We project the monster onto an ancient calendar because we are too afraid to look in the mirror and realize we are the ones praying for the fire. The myth of the ancient end times and the reality of our current chaos are the exact same thing. We are still stuck in that broken room, waiting for the sky to fall. I was walking down a rain-slicked Tokyo street at midnight when I saw that stark, black and white sketch pasted onto a concrete wall. It was an uncanny, completely emotionless male face staring straight through me, surrounded by glowing neon flyers. Every single night, across completely different continents, thousands of random patients wake up in a cold sweat claiming they saw this exact man in their sleep. The corporate nightmare begins when you trace the origin of that face and realize it was all a brilliant marketer's experiment. They intentionally tapped into a deep, universal psychological archetype to create a self-replicating viral myth that completely invaded mainstream television and manga. It was a corporate virus designed to infect our literal dreams. The audio drops into absolute, dead silence as you stare at the flyers under the street lamps. You think you are safe because you know it's a total fabrication, a clever hoax meant to drive internet traffic. But the psychological trap is already sprung inside your subconscious mind. The transition from a fake digital image to a real mental haunting is completely seamless. If the face was nothing but a marketing stunt, you have to ask yourself why people are still frantically reporting him in their dreams tonight. The monster on the paper and the figure standing at the foot of your bed are the exact same entity. The heavy glass case inside the dimly lit, vintage curiosity exhibition smelled like stale formaldehyde and old rot. My flashlight focused directly on a grotesque, 3-foot-long mummified creature with its jaws locked tight in a perpetual, agonizing scream. The eager public expected to see a beautiful, ethereal mermaid, but what they got was a horrific monument to pure human exploitation. The dark reality of these historical sideshows makes your stomach instantly turn. Overseas fishermen violently sewed a juvenile monkey's torso onto the back half of a dead fish just to secure a massive, lucrative payout from desperate Western collectors. They didn't care about the cruelty. They only cared about exploiting our desperate need to see the impossible. A low, metallic scraping sound echoes from the dark corners of the exhibition room. The original artifact was completely lost to a fire a long time ago, but the insatiable human desire to pay cold cash to witness agony remains completely unquenched. The real monster isn't the stitched-together creature in the glass. The monster is the man who built it, and the crowd that line up to gawk at the suffering. We weave these myths of magical sea creatures to mask the brutal, historical reality of our own endless greed. We are completely obsessed with looking at the grotesque because it reminds us of what we hide inside. The primitive 2001-era web interface glowed faintly in the dark, displaying cold, plain text listings for high-quality human meat, sausages, and stock bones. The angry emails absolutely flooded federal offices for weeks, demanding an immediate armed raid on a website that openly claimed to cater to the sophisticated human consumer. The sheer panic drove 500,000 hits a day to a site that sold absolutely nothing but gross, edgy branding. It proves just how easily the internet's early structure could convince a gullible public that cannibalism had gone completely corporate. We are so incredibly ready to believe that our systems are entirely rotten that we didn't even bother to check if the site was real. The psychological dread comes from how quickly society accepted the idea of commercialized human slaughter. The text on the screen begins to warp into corrupt code right in front of your eyes. It was all an elaborate joke, a dark piece of satire meant to expose the internet's lawless nature. But the joke stops being funny when you realize what happened behind the scenes. What happens when the parody attracts real predators and someone actually tries to fulfill an order? The mythical monster who eats human flesh and the modern internet user browsing listings are separated by nothing but a single mouse click. The retro fast food commercial abruptly glitches on the screen, cutting directly to a dark courtroom scene where forensic evidence photos are displayed on a digital board. You think you are just enjoying a standard bowl of hot chili until the sudden, sickening crunch reveals a partially cooked human finger hidden beneath the sauce. That single bite completely shattered a massive brand, costing them over $21 million in a massive public relations nightmare. But the story completely unraveling in court was far more twisted than any corporate negligence. It was a calculated domestic scam involving a co-worker's severed industrial accident relic, fried up in a home kitchen just to extort a payday. They brought the literal horrors of the workplace into the public dining space. The heavy sound of hot oil sizzling dominates the audio track as you look at the evidence photos. The perpetrator received 9 long years behind bars for their greed, but the lingering disgust completely changed the way the public views food safety forever. The myth of the faceless corporate poisoner and the reality of the desperate scammer fused together. The real danger isn't a massive corporate conspiracy. The true horror is that the person sitting at the booth right next to you might be crazy enough to put a human body part in their mouth just to collect a check. I still remember the cold sweat that broke out on my neck when I looked at the old crime scene photos from that quiet Texas suburb. The warnings are drilled into every single child's head before they knock on a stranger's door on Halloween. Check the candy for needles, razor blades, and deadly poison. We grew up terrified of the faceless monster hiding in the dark down the street, waiting to hurt an innocent kid for twisted fun. But the data shows a stranger has never actually distributed lace candy to trick-or-treaters. The entire global myth stems from a single, horrific act of a father taking the life of his own son for a cheap insurance payout. He used the cover of a legendary urban legend to execute his own child, blending his real-world malice into a seasonal campfire story. The wind howls through the audio track as you look at the old court documents. We desperately project the monster onto the stranger at the door because the historical reality is simply too terrifying to accept. The boogeyman isn't waiting out there in the foggy night. The transition from myth to reality happens right inside the living room. The monster we fear and the parent tucking the child into bed are the exact same entity, showing that the true threat is already inside the house. The emergency broadcast alert template popped up on the television on a quiet Monday afternoon, its stark gray boxes completely cutting off the regular programming. An ear-piercing warning tone blasted through the living room speakers, making everyone freeze in absolute terror as the robotic voice announced that the dead were rising from their graves and actively attacking the living. You sit there completely paralyzed, listening to a highly convincing hacker collective simulate the literal end of days over public state airwaves. It wasn't a movie or a drill. It felt like a discovered diary of a dying world playing out in real time. For those few minutes, the ancient myth of the zombie apocalypse became a concrete, terrifying historical reality for thousands of panicked citizens. The warning tone suddenly drops a whole octave, turning into a distorted, low-frequency drone that vibrates the floorboards. The unidentified pranksters who hijacked the state's emergency architecture did it just for a quick laugh, exposing how incredibly fragile our systems of authority really are. The psychological fallout of that hoax didn't end when the station regained control of the broadcast. The real horror settled into the community's mind the very next day. If a group of random kids can fake a cosmic nightmare this easily, what happens when a real threat is announced and nobody believes it? I spent hours scrolling through encrypted tech forums, staring at a complex web of glowing server nodes, routing through multiple global relays until the connection slowed down to a crawl. They talk about the infamous red rooms as if they are a simple ticketed event. Pay a heavy entry fee in crypto, drop a donation, and vote in the live chat to determine exactly how the helpless victim is dispatched. But when you apply a strict technical lens to the actual architecture, you realize browsers like Tor physically cannot sustain live stream video traffic, exposing the legendary Red Rooms as brilliant creepypastas exploiting our fear of an unpoliced dark web. The myth of the digital execution chamber was built to feed our modern paranoia about what lurks in the unseen parts of the internet. The server lines flicker and die out on the monitor, leaving you alone in the dark. Yet, the rumors persist across every forum because the absolute anonymity of the dark web makes it impossible to prove what isn't hiding in the deep space. The myth of the faceless online butcher and the reality of human depravity merge perfectly here. The monster isn't a glitch in the software. It's the fact that thousands of real people actively log on every single night, desperately hoping to find a real room open. The vintage 1950s family photograph slowly faded onto the screen under the harsh desk lamp, showing two smiling children and their mother sitting at a standard dinner table. But the left side of the frame is completely dominated by a dark, blurred shape hanging completely upside down from the ceiling rafters. The father didn't see it when he snapped the shutter, but the developed film revealed a dangling body sharing their brand new Texas home. The digital symmetry and heavy vignetting prove it was just an internet art piece weaponized into a viral haunting myth back in 2013. It was a completely fabricated image designed to look like a leaked piece of historical found footage to trick your brain. A sharp, sudden audio pop mimics an old camera flash, breaking the silence of the room. Even though you know it's entirely fake, looking into the empty, distorted eyes of that digital image still triggers a primal, uncontrollable fight-or-flight response deep in your chest. The transition from a harmless Photoshop project to a real psychological threat is instant. The mythical ghost hanging from the ceiling and the dark corners of your own bedroom become the exact same thing, proving that a lie can become a real monster if it finds a way into your head. The handheld camera moved shakily through the dense Australian outback, looking straight up into the pitch-black canopy of the ancient eucalyptus trees. The locals look you dead in the eye at the pub and warn you about the carnivorous, predatory cousin of the koala that drops from the high branches straight for your throat. The psychological mechanics of this classic cultural hazing ritual are incredibly simple. An entire nation coordinates an elaborate inside joke to make outsiders feel completely exposed in a land where everything already feels hostile. They build up the myth of the drop bear to watch tourists panic at every single rustle of a leaf. The intense sound of branches snapping overhead amplifies the quiet night audio track. It's a funny joke for the tourists during the day, until the sun drops completely below the horizon and the unfamiliar sounds of the bush begin to perfectly mimic a predator's approach. The myth and the reality of the dangerous wilderness fuse into one single, terrifying environment. You realize the real monster isn't the fake creature in the trees. It's your own isolated mind turning the real, wild world into a living nightmare where you are always the prey. The computer monitor showed a seemingly harmless, archaic image hosting website called That Old Guy's Image Host, but the screen rapidly shifted to highlight lines of hidden HTML code. Hidden within the metadata were specific job listings for heavy weapons experts, immediate sea deployment, and chilling military insights on the use of stainless steel piano wire. You feel a cold dread settle in your stomach as you realize internet sleuths connected this simple, dusty website to a network of global contract killers. They called the Mystery Lake City Quiet Pills, and for years, people believed they were looking at the digital footprints of real international mercenaries. But the deeper investigations suggest it was all an incredibly elaborate roleplay devised by a small, tight-knit forum collective. The myth of the hidden digital assassins was just a game played in the dark corners of the web. The code begins to compile itself automatically on screen, flashing commands in the dark. It makes you wonder about the human psychology behind the keyboard. Was it truly just a harmless game, Or did the anonymous role-players accidentally provide a flawless, perfect blueprint for real-world wetwork operations? The transition from a fake forum story to a real-world threat is completely seamless. The mythical internet monster and the real contract killer become the exact same entity in your mind, proving that once a dark idea is coded into the world, it takes on a terrifying life of its own. I held the makeshift plastic bottle tightly in my hands, feeling the weird warmth of the murky, fermenting sludge sealed inside with a thick rubber band. The mainstream media called it, but hash, warning terrified parents across America to desperately smell their children's breath for the intoxicating, mind-numbing fumes of fermented human waste. A massive wave of moral panic swept the nation overnight, turning suburban neighborhoods into a frenzy of suspicion. The narrative balances the real, tragic existence of this dangerous substance among unhoused youth in Zambia with a completely fabricated hoax cooked up by a Florida Sheriff's Department looking at a joke forum post. They took a distant human tragedy born from absolute desperation and packaged it into an edgy, viral scare tactic for local television news. The sound of expanding gas builds slowly in the audio mix, threatening to pop the plastic seal. A slow news week turned a horrific reality of extreme poverty into a national, drug scare hallucination for everyday citizens. We readily believe the myth because we are deeply terrified of what our youth might do in the dark. The monster we constructed in our minds and the real, suffering children a world away are linked by our own fear. The hoax didn't protect anyone. It just exposed how easily we turn real human agony into a spectacle. For decades, families paused their worn-out VHS tapes in the middle of the classic Wizard of Oz forest sequence, staring intently at a dark, swinging silhouette in the distant background foliage. They were absolutely convinced they were witnessing the real-time tragedy of a depressed actor dangling from a noose right on a bright, Technicolor movie set. The rumor became an absolute staple of Hollywood urban legends, passed down like a dark family secret. But when you look at the actual studio timelines and high-definition film scans, the terrifying shape is revealed to be a simple, exotic bird rented to add atmosphere to the set. The legendary hanging body was nothing but a collective optical illusion born from grainy tape quality. The joyous, classic soundtrack of the film plays at an unnaturally slow, distorted pitch in the background. The hanging body was a total myth, but the historical reality of that movie set was a literal nightmare. The real-life chemical poisonings, severe studio accidents, and agonizing burns endured by the cast were meticulously covered up by the powerful executives. The transition from the fake ghost to the real history is the true horror. We obsess over a mythical suicide on screen because it distracts us from the real, monstrous exploitation that took place right in front of our eyes. The old, rusted oil drilling rig stood solitary against a bleak, freezing Siberian landscape under a heavy gray sky. They drilled down an impossible 14.4 kilometers into the Earth's crust, breaking through a massive hollow cavity where the internal temperature skyrocketed to a blazing 1,000 degrees Celsius. The scientists lowered a heat-resistant microphone into the abyss, expecting to record tectonic shifts. Instead, the audio track was suddenly flooded by a highly controversial, terrifying audio file. A dense, chaotic wall of thousands of human voices screaming in agonizing torment. The viral report claimed they had literally breached the ceiling of hell itself, sending shockwaves of panic through religious communities worldwide. The audio file plays clearly for 3 seconds before cutting out into harsh static. The historical reality is that a simple religious publication's metaphorical tale mutated into a global internet phenomenon, forcing scientists to issue official, frustrated denials. The recording was actually just a clever loop of ambient street noise blended with movie sound effects. But as you listen to the cadence in the dark, it sounds so distinctly, horrifyingly human. The myth of the subterranean underworld and the reality of our own deep-seated fear of damnation become the exact same thing. The desk lamp illuminated an intricate, life-size sculpture of a mummified creature with hollow bones, translucent wings, and preserved skin resting quietly in a display case. Back in 2007, over 20,000 hits a day flooded a website claiming prominent anthropologists had finally validated the remains of a real fairy found in the countryside. The world held its breath, thinking the magical folklore of our ancestors had finally broken into our modern reality. The truth reveals the sheer brilliance of an illusion designer who staged an elaborate April Fool's prank so perfectly that it completely broke the internet. Even after the artist fully confessed to building the specimen from scratch, die-hard believers aggressively accused him of executing a massive government cover-up to hide the magical reality. The long shadow of the wings stretches across the concrete wall as the camera shifts perspective. The artist eventually sold the prop on eBay, but the deep human desperation for magic remains a potent, dangerous vulnerability. The myth of the woodland creature and the reality of our fragile minds fuse together here. We are so entirely broken by our sterile, modern lives that we will violently defend a blatant hoax just to keep the monster alive. I was looking right at the shaky, nighttime found footage recorded from a high balcony inside a restricted corporate complex, focusing on a group of figures dressed in long black cloaks gathered around a massive bronze statue. The camera violently shakes as one of the cloaked figures steps forward under the moonlight, raising a gleaming blade in a staged occult human sacrifice right in the main square of the world's leading particle physics laboratory. The investigator breaks down the viral video, revealing how elite international scientists used their high-security access passes to orchestrate a terrifying spoof that completely backfired on the institution's public relations. They wanted to play a prank on the internet by bringing a classic, dark occult myth into the heart of modern science. The sound of frantic footsteps running down a concrete corridor echoes sharply through the audio track. They laughed it off as a harmless joke, but you have to look at the human psychology driving the event. What kind of brilliant mind spends their off hours simulating a ritualistic murder at the birthplace of modern physics? The transition from a geeky workplace prank to pure psychological terror is instant. The mythical cultist in the robe and the highly educated scientist holding the knife become the exact same entity, showing that the line between ancient superstition and cutting-edge reason is paper-thin. The computer screen mimicked a standard 2009 YouTube player interface, starting with a friendly, awkward young man talking directly to a viewer named Walter about a cool girl he just met at the local mall. The casual tone changes completely when the camera cuts to a dingy, concrete basement door, slowly opening to reveal a bound woman crying frantically in the pitch-black corner. The narrator enters the dark reality of this viral video, which immediately triggered a massive federal police investigation due to its terrifyingly realistic acting and its tragic, coincidental timing with the real-life disappearance of a teenager named Kayla Berg. It felt like a leaked piece of real-world horror captured on a forgotten hard drive. The heavy basement door slams shut with a loud, metallic echo that vibrates your speakers. The creators eventually apologized for the edgy art piece, but the cold dread it inflicted on a missing girl's mother can never be erased. The myth of the internet boogeyman and the reality of human trafficking collide into a horrific mess. The monster isn't a fictional character in a horror movie. The true horror is that the fake video looked exactly like a real crime, proving that our entertainment thrives on the literal nightmares of real families. I spent hours staring at a highly complex, color-coded iceberg chart where the bottommost layers were completely blurred out with aggressive red digital artifacts. We look at these charts covered by massive internet creators, searching for the absolute limit of cinematic horror, where the darkest rumors speak of illicit, underground snuff networks operating exclusively in the hidden spaces of the web. The segment carefully separates the horrific, real mixtapes of ClearNet tragedies from the mythical, urban legend films that forum users aggressively claim are locked behind massive, impossible paywalls. The myth of the ultimate, hidden forbidden movie has obsessed the internet for a generation. A low digital drone steadily increases in volume, filling the empty room with an oppressive sound. The specific, terrifying titles listed at the bottom of the chart are total fabrications. But the fact that thousands of everyday people actively search for their existence exposes a deeply disturbing flaw in human curiosity. The myth and our reality merge perfectly here. The monster isn't the fake movie on the list. The true monster is the audience that craves to look at the unseeable, proving that our collective mind is a very dark place. The cold, sterile medical animation of an ultrasound played on a loop against a pitch-black background, showing a developing biological anomaly inside a human torso. Since 1999, an incredibly detailed website has meticulously tracked the medical history of the first biological male to successfully carry a child to full term. The narrative shifts completely into the realm of transgressive conceptual art, explaining how a digital installation by an artist named Virgil Wong successfully triggered a massive flood of thousands of genuine inquiries from individuals desperate to replicate the fictional medical breakthrough. It was a beautifully executed hoax that played on our deepest desires and fears about the future of our own bodies. The steady, rhythmic beep of an EKG monitor fills the audio track before flatlining into static. The site was a complete hoax, but it perfectly anticipated the fluid, terrifying boundary between technological fiction and modern medical reality. The myth of the artificial creation of life and the reality of biohacking become the exact same thing. The monster isn't the fake medical anomaly on the screen. It's our own desperate urge to rewrite human nature, using the internet to manifest our wildest evolutionary fantasies into reality. A series of high-contrast, deeply disturbing photographs flash rapidly on the screen, showing a man casually eating what appears to be a prepared human fetus at a restaurant table. Lowbrow news publications took the graphic images completely out of context, aggressively claiming that a new, expensive culinary delicacy had taken over the underground black market in China. The investigator exposes the reality behind the horror. It was a transgressive 2000 Shanghai performance art piece titled Eating People, designed to aggressively challenge the relationship between human nature and the law. The artist wanted to push society to its absolute breaking point to see how we would react. The camera moves closer to the text of the old, dusty news article under the desk lamp. The fetus was just a prop built from animal parts, but the intentional media manipulation successfully triggered massive waves of real-world xenophobia and unverified global outrage. The transition from a shock art exhibition to a geopolitical weapon is completely seamless. The mythical monster who eats his own kind and the real-world media executives who print lies for profit become the exact same entity, proving that the truth is always the first casualty of fear. The bright, chaotic live television studio layout flashed on the screen, with rapid Dutch text scrolling down the sidebar as a terminally ill woman stood before millions of viewers. Her task was to decide which of the 3 desperate contestants would receive her kidneys as a life-saving prize. The international outrage was immediate and explosive, turning into global condemnation of reality TV greed. But the entire game show was actually a highly elaborate hoax designed by a dying actress to combat the country's severe organ donor shortage. The network completely fabricated the competition to trick the public, using the medium of a trashy game show to force a mirror onto a broken healthcare system. It was the only deception on the entire iceberg designed to actually save human lives. The studio applause track plays loudly before abruptly cutting to a dead, heavy silence. The stunt resulted in tens of thousands of real donor registrations overnight, proving how easily the public can be manipulated into doing the right thing. The myth of the cruel, dystopian media producer and the reality of the altruistic liar become the exact same entity. We realize that the system won't save us, So we have to rely on a manufactured monster to shock our collective conscience into action. A shaky, vertical found footage smartphone video shows a dark tree line at the edge of a suburban park, where a tall figure in an oversized evil clown mask stands completely motionless under a street lamp. Back in 2016, a collective hysteria completely gripped the Western world as reports surfaced of killer clowns tormenting neighborhoods, causing schools to lock down and embassies to issue travel warnings. The Great Clown Panic was a non-existent crisis manufactured by the mainstream media, who weaponized a handful of isolated teenage pranks into a national threat just to farm clicks. The narrative fed into a deep, psychological fear of the trickster archetype, causing real, armed vigilante groups to patrol the streets with baseball bats. The audio tracks the terrifying sound of heavy footsteps running across dry grass in the dark. The media created the monster out of thin air, and the panicked public brought the violence to sustain it. The transition from a harmless internet trend to a dangerous real-world paranoia was seamless. The mythical killer clown and the real-world neighbor hiding in the bushes with a weapon become the exact same entity, showing how easily a manufactured lie can drive us to the brink of real madness. The visual turns into a dark, neon-lit 1981 arcade POV, focusing on a matte black cabinet with minimal vector graphics flashing hypnotically against a player's face. The lines wrapped around the block for a machine that allegedly induced immediate seizures, amnesia, and horrific night terrors, monitored by men in black suits who collected data directly from the software. The myth of Polybius claimed the game was a rogue offshoot of the government's real MKUltra mind control project, but it was actually a brilliant internet fabrication created in 2000 to exploit our deep distrust of state institutions. It was an urban legend constructed from our collective trauma regarding government experimentation. The arcade game's synthesized audio track screeches as the screen glitches violently. The machine never actually existed in 1981, but the internet myth was so incredibly potent that modern fans built a real, hypnotic version of the game anyway, bringing the fiction to life. The transition from a digital campfire story to a physical object is complete. The mythical mind control machine and the real-world software built by fans are the exact same thing, proving that our paranoia has the power to manifest the very monsters we are trying to expose. The grainy, leaked NASA film format shows a close-up POV of a female humanoid figure with complex facial attachments resting inside the narrow hull of a spacecraft. An aging astronaut uploaded the footage in 2007, claiming he commanded a secret, joint US-Soviet Apollo 20 mission that recovered an extraterrestrial in stasis from the far side of the moon. The masterfully edited video spliced real space footage with practical cinematic props, dropped intentionally on April Fool's Day to test the boundaries of digital belief. The creator wanted to see if the internet would blindly accept a Hollywood prop as a historical declassified record. The audio track simulates the heavy, rhythmic hiss of an astronaut's oxygen line. Even after the hoax was thoroughly debunked by space historians, the comment sections remain full of individuals who look at the practical effect and choose to believe. The myth of the lunar goddess and the reality of human gullibility fuse together perfectly here. The monster isn't the fake alien on the screen. It is our own desperate need to escape the mundane reality of the Earth, choosing to worship a beautiful lie rather than face the cold, empty silence of space. The screen stays completely dark except for official police transcript text scrolling down the center, detailing a British apartment raid. We made it to the absolute floor of the iceberg, to a 20-minute home movie seized from a real dark web collector in Lancashire, where every detective who viewed the footage swore under oath they were watching a real child murder take place on camera. The narrative reaches a state of pure psychological dread, detailing how investigators hit a total wall for 15 months, failing to utilize international tracking assets while public outrage mounted over the system's negligence. It felt like the ultimate, unpoliced horror hidden in the dark spaces of the internet. The audio track slowly introduces the sound of a ticking clock that suddenly stops. Unlike every other layer of this chart, there is no artist confession, no debunking video, and no confirmation of an optical illusion. The iceberg ends in absolute, unresolved darkness, leaving the identity of the victim forever trapped in the real world. The myth of the internet creepypasta and the horrific reality of human depravity become the exact same thing, proving that the true monster doesn't hide behind a screen. It lives right down the street.